Everyone, thank you for coming. How many people here in the room? This is all about ponds and pond management. Our man Corey here, he's kind of really good at it. I've been doing business with him at least 10 or 12 years now.
Yep.
So we've done a lot of projects together, not only in Wisconsin, but other states. And so I can vouch for him and saying he knows what he's doing and he give you good advice. I'll tell you that one of the main reasons I dealt with Corey over the years is that, you know, we all like to think we're pretty good at running our parks and running our swimming pools, and, you know, we want to know as owners how to do this. Where some of the biologists in the world that I've done business with, they don't want to share any information because they want to do it all and get paid. I'm just being straight up, you know. When these guys are 2 or 3 hours away from your projects, I'm not paying for all that travel time, you know. So that was the thing that really turned me on about dealing with him and his company, is that, you know, he's going to educate you because you're the boots on the ground. When you're looking at a pond, you're the one that has to either, you know, adjust the chemicals or make the phone call or something, just like a swimming pool. How much chlorine do I put in? You know, etc. We have to know what we're talking about. So he's going to talk about a lot of that stuff. And, you know, I've had ponds now 15 years, 20 years, and almost every park I touch, we build a pond usually. And the main reason I like ponds, it's the one thing the state doesn't regulate. Can you imagine not having someone, I mean, they come in saying, well, I said, buddy, you don't have a law, so you can have all the opinions you want, but you really can't tell me how to do it, okay? So the chemistry is what he's going to talk about and all that kind of stuff. So with that being said, Corey, it's all yours. And
Thanks,
they
bud.
do have a booth here, and I think you'll learn a lot.
I only had to pay Bud $20 for that introduction too, so by the way. So, well, good morning everyone, and thanks for coming in. So, just out of curiosity, I know there's difference in people interested in ponds and have ponds. Can I get any idea who already has a pond? So quite a few. Okay, and some of them are just interested. So, you know, as Bud said, I'm going to talk about some of the things that we've seen over the past 15 years of the evolvement of ponds and the camping industry, the recreational industry, what they were to where they are now, some of the struggles that maybe as you as campground owners and operators and us as consultants can expect with these ponds, how to identify these things, what maybe you can do, and you know, just kind of make it overall a better experience for your campers. So just a little bit of a background on us. Our company, we started in 2005, and our primary focus has been managing recreational lakes and ponds, both private and public, dealing in all different sorts of industries. And we started to become more and more involved in the recreational swim pond industry as more people found a need and a desire to have these ponds. More people were using them. And then, of course, with that, they came a little bit of struggles of what do I do with it? What do I do with some of the problems? We generally are involved in a concept to completion. We offer, you know, a lot of people come to us first round and, you know, they just have the idea and a piece of paper that they're going to have a pond, and we'll go through some of the technical features, construction features. We get involved with the construction. We're not excavators, but we will do site prep. We oftentimes, you'll see us out there doing the lining of the basin, the water containment, and then we'll come up with some of the management protocols, whether it's equipment or if it's injection pumps and lines, and we'll be installing those to try and help you to better manage the pond. And as Bud said, we've worked in several states, and it's given us a good opportunity to work with other regulators, have an understanding how other states regulate these type of features, whether they're going to call them bathing beaches or true out swim ponds. Some states are much more strict, as Bud said, than Wisconsin is right now. And so it's helped us to take a little bit of their ideas, their research and studies, learn from their mistakes as well, and you know, bring those ideas back to Wisconsin. So my goal today is just to help you guys improve the camping experience for your guests, and as well try and make some of your jobs easier and give you a little bit of direction for if you have these types of ponds. They're not going to be just digging a hole, putting a liner in, filling them with water, and let people swim all summer, and you're not going to have any issues. You got to understand and identify what issues you have, and then understand some of the processes. Realizing they're not just, all fun and sun. We're going to touch on some of the regulations. That part is probably the shortest part in Wisconsin. So we'll go over some of the regulations, both on the construction end and operation, and then, come up with some recommendations that I can give to you guys that you can take back to your campsites and, figure out how you're going to manage your pond. And I'm sure most of you have the, oftentimes dreaded TripAdvisor experience with some of your guests, so I've seen some of the reviews that are out there. It's a big industry just how to manage TripAdvisor, so, we want to try and make certain that if your guests are going to rate your campground or especially your pond, they can give you 5 stars on that. So 15, 20 years ago, if you had a pond, maybe it was a spring-fed pond, it was a lake, you're fortunate to have a natural water body on your campground, you saw the kids and the people, they'd go down there and they'd jump in anything, whether it would be a river or just, any type of pond. So you went ahead, you dug out an area, put a sand beach in, you might see a dozen kids down there on a Saturday or Sunday. You threw in a raft and, they had fun. Today, these swim ponds are changing. If you don't have any water on your property, you're building it, you're digging it, you're putting a liner in, and you're filling it full of obstacle courses, toys, zip lines. I mean, if you name it and they build it, you're putting it in the pond, and that's what people are attracted to. There's certain clientele that have the swimming pool desire, and there's certain clientele that have more of the lake-like experience desire. So these are highly engineered, they're architecturally designed, they're planned out in phases, and they're built specifically to a drawing and a diagram versus just digging a beach in your spring-fed pond. So in the past, and for some of you, current operations might be a spring of the year. If you're like me, going through a seasonal business as you guys do, you're all ready to go, the snow's melting, and we get our inflatables out, put our beach toys, our umbrellas, and let the kids come. And throughout the summertime, I've known, working with a lot of you guys, that if I want to talk to you, I better get on my high horse and trail you around the campground, because you're just putting out fires. And the swim ponds sometimes maybe just get left alone. And, by the time fall comes, you just can't wait to get the things out of there and be done with the season. And there's some things in here that we want to try and incorporate to help minimize some of those stresses for you as far as the ponds go. So my one chance today to give you a little bit of a sales pitch, if you will. This is the only slide, I promise you on that. But, why are these things enjoyable? They really are a very diverse recreational facility. It's not just a body of water. We see people of all ages out there. There's areas for kids, toddlers, you got the middle teenagers, and I even see adults out enjoying themselves, oftentimes like you will in a swimming pool. There's usually multiple zones. There'll be shallow zero entry swim zones. You got deep areas where you might put your obstacle courses in. And the inflatables, you're going to see more of the adults out there. Oftentimes in non-swim times, you're going to still use your pond. I've seen, swimming's closed for the day and they'll turn the lights on and people sit around the pond, just enjoy the ambience. Everyone's attracted to water in some state. And then, for your guys' goal, it's a revenue source. You're increasing user flows. You want to see more activities that you can have for your campgrounds. So we do see a lot more use out of just going in and swimming when we're putting in some of these ponds. So regulatory, we got to look at some of the criteria, both if you're constructing a pond and if you're operating a pond. So on the construction side, it's no different than digging a pond anywhere. There's usually 4 entities that I wanted to have people talk to. Army Corps of Engineers is going to handle a lot of our wetlands. Wetlands have become a big deal nowadays. You got to have a wetland delineation almost anytime you do something of magnitude when you're moving earth. So we got to make certain that we don't have any wetlands. The DNR is going to handle Chapter 30 permitting, if you're excavating so large of an area, shoreland zoning. They're going to provide your stormwater permits and erosion control. The county's typically going to get involved in floodplain issues, so we got to make certain that we got any floodplains we're dealing with, and then just local zoning. I've seen a wide range of, we really don't care what you do, to people that really get involved in wanting to know more about what this pond's going to consist of, and is it going to change any overland flow. So those 4 entities you really want to hit every time you're doing construction permits, and this is outside facilities. We don't touch building permits or sanitary permits, so obviously if you're building a larger facility, you're going to have those issues as well. But on the operational end, really we're only regulated by the DNR as far as a pond goes. We're not chlorinating these ponds, we're not sterilizing these ponds. The ponds are operated under DNR NR 107 and DNR NR 109. And those are the aquatic plant management permits that if you want to use an EPA registered product to go into your pond, those are the permits that you need to have in place. And because we're able to show the regulators that we are building these and finishing off them as ponds, we are able to still operate under DNR and not DSPS. But there's some great resources out there. I've talked to many Department of Health individuals, and I'm sure many of you that have swimming pools, you have your certain rep from the Department of Health you work with. They are very interested in providing guidance for health considerations, how to make certain that your campers are not swimming in something that is unhealthy. They have some great resources out there for you, so I would never hesitate to talk to any of those folks. And then on the website, if you look, one of the things that we're able to do is just follow the Wisconsin Beach Guidelines. And there's a website out there that shows all the different parameters that the state of Wisconsin has chosen to use for closing down beaches. We use E. coli. And if a beach is going to be tested and it's going to be shut down, typically it's going to be because of an E. coli or a blue-green algae bloom. Now in 20 years, I've never seen a blue-green algae bloom or seen one tested in a typical swim pond like this, and I think it's primarily just because of the environment that we support. E. coli, I've seen a lot of tests come back, and those numbers have been very positive. We're well below the threshold of beaches that are shut down. Many of the campgrounds are testing those either daily or multiple times a week, and the numbers are good. So I'd continue to encourage you to keep testing for E. coli and make sure you stand up to the standards of the Wisconsin beach codes. So what we should be coming up with is some best management practices and try and create some consistency in the industry. Because the camping industry is one of the drivers of the recreational ponds, what we don't want to have is all different sorts of approaches out there. When it comes to the regulators watching us, they're going to, who's doing what over here versus over here. It'd be nice to come up with some best management practices, use some of the consistencies that we see in other states and implement them in Wisconsin. Look at some of the proactive solutions that we have and be aware of some of the safety issues that are going to be out there. The more that we have of these swim ponds, ultimately you're going to know the risk starts to increase. So how do we monitor and predict some of the safety issues that are out there? And like Bud said, one of the things I'm not afraid to and I'm encouraging is more operator involvement. As a consultant, we cannot hit up every campground on a daily or weekly basis, and I want to educate you guys on things that you can do and some of the things that we're finding that we can help you to predict when some of the water quality issues are going to be showing their face and how we can get it and intercept that. So our job is not just to come in and service your pond. We want to get you guys more involved, and we need your involvement because it's one of the areas that we're actually lacking in. So we're going to go through some of the water quality issues that we do see out there. Again, some education on your end to understand what are these water quality issues. Is it something you really need to be worried about and panic about? And if you can identify them, you should have a plan that how are you going to react to them? I'm going to talk about some of the maintenance schedules of these ponds. I do see too often that the ponds get built and they get used and abused and they kind of get left aside. And it's like taking anything that you have. If you don't maintain it properly, it's just going to decline in quality. So we're going to talk about some of the recommended maintenance schedules. And I think there's also not only consultants like us that'll help educate you. You guys could help educate your campers. Let them know what they're going to get into. as far as when they go swimming there. Make sure that they understand is, do you have a swimming pool and do you have a pond, and that they're not related and they're not the same type of water conditions. So I do get calls fairly often from the campground owner that panics and he says, oh my God, my pond didn't look like this yesterday, and they want us to react right away. Well, 9 out of 10 times it didn't change overnight, but what we are seeing is there can be a rapid decline. Once the water quality might start to get to a point, it isn't something that happens over a period of months. It's something that can happen over days or a week. So we want to try and look at how can we monitor trends better and predict when those water quality issues are going to occur. And that's where we're going to be needing to incorporate operator staff or the campground owners themselves. So this is a very simple slide that what I'm trying to show here is, if I can get this to work, this blue line here, we do a lot of testing on ponds. So we self-test the ponds, or maybe the campground owners have agreed to a certain budget for water testing. One of the things that we test for is algae in the water, and that's both toxic blue-green algae, and that's where we've come to the confidence. We never really see any of those present, but we do see green algae. And when I get to a point right in here, this is where I'm going to see a campground owner say, my pond doesn't look very good, or you might get a complaint, and then we come out and we say, we should have been called about 2 weeks ago. So what we're looking at here is these are all different water tests that we can do. We can test phosphorus on site, we can test chlorophyll, we can do visual tests, we can test pH. All those parameters, as they are increasing, all of a sudden we're going to get to a point where, yep, now the algae says this is a great home for me and I'm going to set up camp here and take over in your pond. And we want to intercept that in here. So if we can incorporate some more monitoring and testing from you guys that are on site every day, we can try and minimize from your pond getting to here to here. And this is over probably about the last 5-6 years of doing some water testing on ponds. So what we're talking about is some visual tests, maybe using some meters, kind of if you guys operate swimming pools, you understand how to test some of the water. But starting up here, this is a very standard instrument in limnology or lake and pond management. It's a Secchi disc, and all it is it's a tool to measure clarity. Clarity is one of the biggest indicators. When I'm using water quality, we relate that to clarity. And all you do is you go out in your canoe or paddle boat, you lower that down in the water, it's got a calibrated string on it, and till it goes out of sight. And then you look at your string and say, well, that happened today at 9 feet. And we want to document that. This slide's not showing up terribly well on the screen, but what you can see here, maybe on this one, this is a blue water, typical dye, clear pond, and this one back here is from a pond that is, you would say, starting to turn south. We can take a simple 5-gallon pail, white pail, because it reflects color, and color is one indicator that we can see of quality, and just monitor that over time. And if we look at it today and the pond looks like this, and we have 8 feet of clarity, then we can turn to some of our instrumentation that's not terribly expensive. There's a wide range that we can get you set up with. You can go and test the parameters in the pond, log that, and then see how that changes over the next time. And pretty soon we're going to start to predict for when the pond starts to trend in different directions. So as this has trended to darker water, and it's the opposite over here, we want to intercept that right in the middle here. And I believe that with your involvement, we can start to get there. And it'd be something simple like a data log form. We could set something up on the cloud. You guys could it'd probably take 30 minutes, I would say, to do this. Go out before swimming starts. If you had an operator that could take these simple tests, log them, and we could get that instant result. And then we could help track this as well with your guys' observation, and then we could come to the conclusion, hey, things are still going good, or, we better make some changes. So this is relatively new from our company standpoint, working with operators like you to try and implement this, because we're finding a 30-day or a 45-day cycle just isn't cutting it. And we'll talk about the reasons why. So I'm not here to promote Hooters, but Hooters has a concept, right? They have an environment. You're not going to Hooters typically for their burger or their chicken. You're going there for an environment. And if this dude served your chicken, you're probably going to say and turn your nose up at it and go, eesh. But it might taste the same way as if their normal environment was. And the reason I bring this up, we kind of feel like that as implementers of management tools. This is standard protocol in a lake and pond industry and how we apply chemicals to water. Now, most of the products we're applying are EPA registered. They have no swimming and drinking restrictions on them. Oftentimes, many of them are NSF certified. However, in that container, when I'm using it or operators are using it, there's a PPE requirement that makes us, and this is yours truly, look like a big Smurf out there. And my point to this is every time I go and treat a pond, because we don't get a lot of opportunity for downtime in ponds, your guests are walking down, I see them at 8 in the morning already. People are coming out of their cabins, they're ready to go swimming, and this is what they see. I don't believe that this is an acceptable means for your guests to see what we're doing to help manage the water. The perception that they are getting is not the actual perception that's going on. We're not using, I'm going to say toxic, people have different levels of what they want to call of a chemical, but because we're required to have the PPE, it doesn't give that perception. And I'd like to see some shifts towards moving away from this, especially in the recreational ponds. And we did start to do this several years ago. We figured out ways that we can use products that we can inject them into the pond. We figured out ways that we can use water moving devices, but it still wasn't good enough. We take something like this, which is pretty standard. Many of you might recognize these type of cabinets on the side of your pond. We put our equipment in there, we put an injection system, but we still end up carrying these chemicals across your beach because my truck might have to park over here and the cabinet ended up being over here and to get across in the middle. And then we got Sally Jane with her video camera on her phone and she's like, well, this is pretty interesting. What are these guys doing? And I'm kneeling over this cabinet and that goes to Facebook Live or wherever it is. It's just not a good concept. And so I would like to see us get out of sight, out of mind. Many of you that are in some new construction projects, you're going to recognize that we have pushed having some sort of maintenance shelter, something that we can get in, we can do our business, we can calibrate our pumps. We don't have to worry about what your guests are seeing. And it doesn't have to be fancy. Oh, let me back up here. Any type of shed. These are some of the, you see them all over in street corners nowadays, the Amish built or similar type sheds. They have runners or wood floors. You can get them delivered as cheap as $1,500. You can get something a little bit cuter. Maybe you can store something in there, but we can get our pumps in there, we can have our equipment stored in there, and we can do those type of things and get away from that perception. And somebody that's video cameraing us as we're doing our job. So some considerations that you should have if you're going to be building, and some people that have existing ponds that are working with us, you're going to see some recommendations come across for some upgrades. So this next one probably be interesting to a lot of you, and I'm not talking about the unwanted, obnoxious guests that you might have. Everybody's probably had those at their campground, but these are some of the unwanted guests that visit your pond. The concept is true. If you build it, they will come. We can't expect to build, some of these ponds are getting to multiple acres, 4, 5, 6 acres in size. It's a lot of water. It's a big area. It's a big environment. Not only people, but critters are attracted to that. We aren't sterilizing our water. We aren't using chlorine. We aren't disinfecting the water. So when things get in there, they don't die like they would in a swimming pool environment. These are ponds in a lake-like condition. So we've got to know how, one, to address them, two, how to deal with them, and then how to handle your campers when they see them. So the first one, if you talk to my 7-year-old daughter, she'll say the leech is the most ferocious creature on earth. I think she would scream louder with a leech versus a 10-foot alligator in the pond. Our idea of leeches is they're horrible blood-sucking creatures. Well, in general, they're completely harmless, but that doesn't matter to your clients. When they're in the pond and they turn over a pail or a rock and they see a leech, they freak. They don't know what to expect. And I've seen them in various numbers. We have a swim pond at our corporate facility that we use for a lot of training and research, and we might see a leech or two. I've never yet to have a leech attached to somebody, and we have people in the pond all the time. Now that's different for other campgrounds. I've heard that people have come out, they have leeches on their legs. So they're in various numbers, but there's many ponds, we never see them at all. So it's not a guarantee that you're going to build a pond that you got leaches, but the potential's there. So one place, just people ask, where do they come from? We could blame waterfowl. You'll hear several things about waterfowl they'll talk about. I have heard that people have come home from fishing. They have bait buckets, they have fish, and they think they're doing you a favor by dumping their stuff into a pond. There's various ways they can get in there, but typically they'll overwinter in the muck in the bottom of the pond. So most of the options are a panic treatment. You go to the feed mill, you buy a bag of copper sulfate or 10 bags of copper sulfate, you dump it in the pond, and I'm here to say today, try to resist doing that, because not only are you killing the leaches, it does work, but you are killing your pond. We see ponds water quality crash a couple weeks after those copper sulfate treatments, and the reason being is you are killing every microorganism that's in that pond that we are relying on, because there still is an ecosystem that's going on in this pond. Because it's not sterile, if we're using bacterial products, you're killing everything that's in there. And what will happen is that pond water quality will just crash. Very likely most of you are not calibrating anything when you're doing it. Like I said, it's a panic application. The DNR does have restrictions on copper rates in surface water. It's 1 parts per million. And I'm going to guess most of you are probably exceeding that. And it's not even something that when we apply for an NR 107 permit, we're putting copper sulfate on the permit, so you're probably outside your permit anyway. So I would ask you to hold off on that, and we are working with the DNR. There's been a lot of advancements out there because of the spread of zebra mussels on how to deal with different types of control of these mollusks and things that are causing problems. Leeches and zebra mussels, while they're not exactly the same family by any means, that the treatment protocol likely is going to be similar. So right now we're in communications with DNR and DADCAP to make certain that there are some products out there and some techniques that we can use that are a softer approach, but I need to make sure we cover all of our bases, and from everything I'm seeing and talking with the regulators, we are. So we have some products and some techniques that if you know you have leeches or a history of leeches, and I would say a problematic leech issue, not 1 or 2 leeches, talk to us and we can help you develop a plan on how to use some of these new protocols. But one of the softer approaches, and there's many people that probably vouch for this, and this goes back to some education on your users, we've recommended people just put in some largemouth bass. 2 or 3 in an acre pond goes a long ways. We don't want to stock these typically with fish, but if we don't have any bullies in the pond, you're going to get all these little critters are just going to take off and they're going to want to go. So a couple bass, ironically, will do a lot for feeding. They'll keep a lot of these noxious pests at bay. Frogs can be a big one. If you put in a new pond, you can just get thousands and thousands and thousands of frogs in a pond. We see those drastically reduced in numbers as soon as we have just a couple predators. And bass, if people just don't like fish, realistically, they probably shouldn't be swimming in your pond. We understand when you have a lot of aggressive panfish, they'll bite at you, they're really annoying, people don't like them. Bass are different. Bass will stay usually in the deeper areas. When no one's in the pond, you'll see them just swim around. Play games with it. Name your fish, so let the kids try and find them. There's really, I don't hear a lot of negatives, and we can talk to some of the campground owners that have followed through with those recommendations, and they'll see some of their problems have been reduced. The other one we hear is, the little girl came to the office and she's got itchy marks, and of course she was in the water, and it's automatically #1 swimmer's itch. And I think as campground owners, when you call, again, it's kind of that panic state. I got somebody with swimmer's itch. They're going to post this negative comment out there. And again, they go to the feed mill and buy the copper sulfate, and they want to kill everything in the pond. Here's where it takes some time to be a little more educated on swimmer's itch and what it is. Real briefly, it is a parasite that we can't see. They look for a host. They find us. They burrow into our skin, and then we go out of the water, we dry out, and the parasite dies, and that reaction causes a swelling and a red mark, and your skin itches. But swimmer's itch there's a lot of studies being done. They don't know everything about it, but they've learned a lot. It is a cycle that needs to be completed in order for that parasite to become present. And there's a couple other hosts that are needed. We do need something like waterfowl, but they've even found it could be something like even raccoons could be a host. So they come down to the water and drink at night. Ducks or geese land on your pond. It can be the start. And the other thing we need are snails. So if you know you have snails in a pond, you could potentially have the completion of the cycle, because we can't stop the raccoons and the ducks from even randomly coming into the pond. So if we look at options, you have a complaint to swimmer's itch, you know you've had swimmer's itch. The first thing I would do is I would positively ID it. I have seen people that have had a series of spider bites and they've called it swimmer's itch. They've had poison ivy, they call it swimmer's itch. Swimmer's itch is there could be different forms, but certainly it's going to be usually somewhere on the legs. Oftentimes you see it in mucky areas, but we certainly have some very clean lakes around Wisconsin. Every year they're posted, they know they have swimmer's itch. It's not a sign of contamination or pollution of a lake, but it can be really anywhere. The recommendation would be to try and break the cycle. Certainly, if this is the second or third time, don't feed waterfowl. Don't encourage waterfowl. Do everything you can to discourage them, scare them away. Spring and fall, we don't have swimmers and a lot of activity. That's when we have a lot of migration. You'll see, I've seen 100 geese sitting on a swim pond. The nutrient loading that they're putting in there, there's just so many negative things that we don't want to see. So do everything you can to reduce that waterfall, and you're going to take away one of those hosts. The other thing is the snails. It's pretty easy to identify. You look in your sand beach, you got them or you don't have them. I've told campground owners, play games with the kids. There's nothing harmful about a snail. Usually kids aren't even afraid of them, even the youngest of girls. Have them pick up 20 snails, bring them up to the concession stand, give them an ice cream bar. It's the cheapest way that you can possibly do to get rid of those snails, and you're going to reduce one of the biggest risks that we have and we hear for complaints is that's a go-to thing when somebody's got an itch. It's swimmer's itch. So that has worked. But the snails would be the easiest way to get rid of those in your pond. Other recommendations that have come from some of the health advisor areas is suntan lotion. If you know you've just got a history of swimmer's itch, you've done everything you can, you still want to encourage people, and people will still swim in lakes that have swimmer's itch. It's not the end of the world. Maybe encourage them to use suntan lotion. Rigorous drying off with a towel, oftentimes that'll peel that parasite off you, even bathing or showering if you have those facilities. And the other thing that we're going to talk on several times is get rid of the muck. If that again is that environment, try to make certain that you're not having an area that's a mucky area. Kids are swimming in that. I've been working in lakes and ponds for 20 years and I've never had swimmer's itch. I don't know if I'm immune to it, and I've been in some of the worst conditions, but where I generally see people that get it is playing in muck, the black water stirring up, they're in doing something and they come out with swimmer's itch. That's not conclusive on every case, but that's where you see it. Most of these ponds we're talking about don't have those conditions. So try and manage the muck a little bit. So this is the bottom of a pond. If any of you have ever dove down or looked at what your pond looks like, we do a lot of sediment testing. And this winter we actually went around when we were doing some sediment testing. We stopped in at a lot of campgrounds and we wanted to see what's going on in the bottom to give you guys an idea. And this is about 1 year old. So as 1 year old pond, we have, it's pretty typical, 1 to 2 inches of sediment after a year. Some of this is obviously probably mixed with some sand that has slid down into the bottom, but this was more in the middle of a pond. So we know we're getting buildup, and this pond did not have a runoff issue. That's one of the construction features we talk about. So this is all coming from leaves, grass clippings, dust in the air. This is what's settling on your pond. And it's not really one of those things that you want to say it's out of sight, out of mind. We have to deal with this. So why would we want to suck up the muck? Number one, it's probably one of the biggest sources of internal nutrient loading besides your guess. If you don't have runoff, there's nowhere else it can come from. It's those two sources. It's an environment for the host of some of these organisms that we don't want. There's a potential that if you are going to have a zone that kids are swimming in or hanging on toys and that's not as deep, possibly they could stir that up, disrupting your water clarity. And if you don't do it over time, we tested one, it was 2 feet deep of muck in a relatively small pond. So you think if you designed your pond at 12 feet deep, you've already lost 2 feet of water depth. So staying ahead of that is something that we want to be more aware of. The biggest thing is, most people say, how in the world am I ever going to accomplish this task? You guys got to come up with a plan. I've yet to have two ponds that are exactly the same. So how do you come up with a plan? So things you got to look at. How big is your pond? If you got a half-acre pond or a 5-acre pond, you're certainly going to have different techniques. What's your bather load? How many people are you running through your pond? We see a wide range of uses of ponds. If you do have external runoff or things of that nature, number one, I'd ask you to correct it, but consider that, because every time you have runoff and rain events, you're going to have sediment that's going to get brought into the pond. A discharge site. So if you're going to dewater the pond, where am I going to go with all this water? 1-acre ponds pushing 1 million gallons of water, and we're up to 5 acres. So think of the gallons of water in these ponds. Where are we going to go with all this water? What can you use to fill it back up? Some people are using municipal water. Every gallon that goes in, they're going to pay a bill for that. Some people are fortunate they have high-capacity wells. They can have them filled in about 2 days, but I've seen other ones, they're flopping garden hoses in their pond, and it takes them 3 months. So do we really want to always get rid of that water when that's not really our problem? Has it ever been done before? And again, what's your labor? Are you managing the campground yourself? Do you have staff that are doing it? So we can help you come up with a plan if it seems daunting. We've done this work before. It's not typically a service we offer, but here's some ideas. Up at the top, vacuum trucks. Have them come in for a day on a small pond. You can get rid of the water. You're left with a slurry of muck in the bottom. They can suck it up. They can haul it to a dump site. This material's not hazardous. It doesn't need to go to a landfill. You could take it to a dump site, spread it in a farmer's field, use it for organic fertilizer. The material that we did test was very high in phosphorus, so it'd be good to spread anywhere. But if you've got a larger pond, we may have to be looking at some sort of diver dredging, sucking company. There's some robotic vacuum systems out there that we're inquiring on. But if you've got 5-6 million gallons of water in your pond, you may not want to get rid of all that water, and there are companies that can come out. And when you look at what was on that pond, it's really a fluff. You go down there and you turn it around. Sometimes these divers that are used to sucking muck out of natural ponds are talking about 2-3 feet of muck filled with aquatic plants. It's a daunting task. They can get 8,000-9,000 square feet done in a day, and it costs you about $5,000. This is a much different vacuuming. When you go over this, it literally would be like vacuuming your carpet. It's very fluffy, very easy to suck up. It's just a coating, and especially on the ones I'm talking about with a liner. If you have a more natural spring-fed or natural pond, then it's going to be a different job. But the pump on the right, if you're a do-it-yourselfer, this is something I'd encourage you to invest in. It's about a $2,000 investment. This pump is designed to suck muck. It's like the workhorse of the shop vacs. You dewater your pond with a normal dewatering pump. But this thing, when you get down to the end, you can simply hold the intake and then just walk, and it'll suck the muck right up. So if you're going to do something yourself, this would be the one I would consider getting, and you can buy them almost anywhere online. It'd be a good investment. So the key benefits we want to look at getting rid of that muck is reducing the nutrient load. It also will give you time for maintenance. I mean, with all these obstacle courses out there, and we're putting anchors in, we have no idea what's going on with some of these anchors. You can perform maintenance, you can inspect the facilities, redress sand. It's amazing. You expose sand to air for a few days, it just re-bleaches all that sand again. You can add sand, pull it up. So a lot of benefits to get this done. And I know some people are doing them every year. They swim in the season, they pump them down, they fill them back up. That's their process, and it works for them. Maybe not everybody needs to do that. Maybe it's a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan. And that's part of just seeing what your water quality is doing and looking at the bottom. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about water quality management. That's our main purpose when we're working with campground owners, is how do we make this water appealing to people? This is very common. Again, this projector doesn't show the slides as well, but this is a relatively clean, crisp water appearance. It's normally turquoise, so it's not coming up with a color. This is what we want to expect with a pond. It looks like a very nice lake. It's not a swimming pool, but people would have no problem jumping into water like that. What we end up seeing though is times where the water clarity is going away, it's turning darker, generally it's ending up turning green. And if we understand what's going on, it really is a non-invasive planktonic green algae, and that doesn't sound like anything but some fancy science, but it's really just an aesthetic issue. It's not usually a health issue. Anybody that drinks excess amount of lake or pond water will probably get an upset stomach, but it's more of an aesthetic issue for you guys. It's feeding on those nutrients in the water. It's a early pioneer species that if it's got the right conditions and the nutrients, it's going to grow. And the biggest issue is, other than aesthetics, it's a safety issue. It's taken away that clarity. And if there's one thing that I talked with regulators on, and I said, you know, why they might have issues with swim ponds, or maybe they want to see more care with swim ponds, it's clarity. What's going on if somebody goes under the water? So this is one thing that we'd certainly want to address with these swim ponds. Most of the time, if you built your pond, you're going to see, you know, first 3 years, things stayed pretty good. Some ponds, they fill them up, and I know I've heard, you know, the first year and a couple months in, they're starting to turn green. But generally speaking, if you're following some of the construction parameters, 1 to 3 years, not a lot of problems. But you get to that 3, 4, 5+ years, that's where we're going to start to find these issues. That's really where you got to start addressing, this is time to clean my pond back out. Don't wait till it's a problem, you know, address it before, but it's about that time frame so you can start to predict things. The bather load. So this is one thing that we've had to adjust to. We've tried keeping up with it. You guys are moving much faster than when we're able to. But again, when I go back to 20 years ago, there's a dozen people in the pond. I'm seeing 300 bathers an acre a day in a pond. We used to go out and we could, you know, manage a pond Monday through Friday. It's relatively a ghost town. No one's around. Now you guys are selling wristbands 7 days a week. There's no downtime. These are profit centers for you. You can't afford to have that. Well, you're just putting all this loading into a pond, and maybe we got to look at start managing some of that. A lot of the other states and data that we're able to have, they give numbers out there, but a lot of that's relating to lifeguards. Not so much water quality. Right now, because lifeguards are not a mandatory item around a lake or a pond, we can't find that. So, you know, in our minds, we can calculate nutrient loading from a bather and X amount of bathers that are going to, you know, urinate in your pond. Let's be honest, it's probably happening. We can calculate how many pounds of manure a goose is going to produce and how many pounds of phosphorus it takes to produce algae. A suggestion maybe that we could look at is, you know, one bather per every 200 square foot. That's 200 bathers in a 1 acre pond. You have to decide if that suits your campground, your flow, what you guys want to see. But somewhere we got to get away from taking these ponds and everybody that's in the campground is shoulder to shoulder, they're abusing your pond. And we just right now, the technology, the products, they haven't been there to keep up with all that. Look at, again, these external sources, the runoff, the waterfall, fertilizers. If you've got that stuff running into your pond, again, you're just declining the life of the pond. The quality of the water just can't keep up. These aren't highly sophisticated ecosystems. They're relatively weak ecosystems. I can take a nice pond with a diverse amount of native aquatic plants, and I can afford to have some runoff in there because I know that the microbiota, the plants, everything in there is going to absorb some of that before it's going to get with an algae bloom. These ponds are plastic, sand, and rock. What's going to absorb all of this material that we have running into a pond? So when you get those nutrient loads, the algae is one of the first things that we're going to see take off. So we have to understand how to deal with that. The other thing is some education, again, getting back with you guys on your involvement. So last year was a hellacious year as far as rainfall events. We were getting calls, you know, yeah, we had 9 inches of rain last night. And it's like, yeah, these numbers are outrageous. Your pond's full, 9 inches of rain coming in. It's hundreds of thousands of gallons of water that's going out of your pond. Well, guess what's going out with it? All the products that we put in to help manage it, and you diluted that. So if you guys know that is a problem. Most people never knew it. We have to have products available for you so you can identify those environmental factors, and then you can go out into your shed or wherever you store some of those products, and you can go reapply them yourself to get that concentration back up there. Otherwise, we just don't have the rates there to work with, and then we're going to start to see these algae issues start to take off. Maintenance schedules. Our company, we were generally set up trying to propose a once every 30 days, or call us when there's a problem. We're realizing that that's not fully adequate. We don't know when these environmental factors are going to set in. We don't know when your high peak users are going to be in the pond. Through monitoring and testing and involvement, if you guys know what to look at, we need to be able to be prepared on a more flexible schedule so we can address those items before we get to day 30, but we had a problem 2 weeks ago. Just monitoring some of these trends, the trending that's going to get towards our water quality issues. So here's 8 things that you could take away that I would like to see. We're going to have them incorporated in our plans and proposals. We really need to be doing more routine water testing. We need to see that data. We need to see the trends. We have identified the trends are real. Now we just need to make sure we're doing the work. I think we got to get away from doing a lot of these on the surface treatments. I don't have a problem. Oh. Somebody's going to lose their presentation next week or next time. We need to do more injecting, getting the products in. I'm going to throw it out there, and many people may not agree with their operations, but a down maintenance time. If your high flows are, Friday through Monday, and a lot of camping is week long, have a day to do maintenance. And when we do, the pond's got to be closed. You do maintenance in a swimming pool. You go to Disney World, they do maintenance. We don't see them out there cleaning. And when fortunately, we don't have the ability to do it at nighttime. So is there a day a week that you could say, when the maintenance needs, you're going to know to close it. But if there's an emergency, we got to get the ponds closed. I've watched too many kids sitting there as we drive by with our applicators. Parents are sitting right there. We're out in our clown suits, and they're letting the kids go right in the water right behind us. So the parents aren't even patrolling that. So maybe considering down times when the maintenance needs to be done. We are going to be incorporating more early season treatments before swimming. We understand some of the issues coming out of winter, so we're going to be incorporating those. Because some of the loads are increasing and the products that we've generally been having success with until we're getting some of these more nutrient-loaded ponds, we're going to be incorporating more chemistry that is like considered flocculation, coagulation type products. It's a little bit different chemistry that's going to go into the pond. It's going to help deal with some of the phosphorus, deal with some of the particulates in the water. I'm all for any bit of management I can have to attack algae. Algae, we don't even identify how many species of algae are out there. Ultrasound's a bit of technology that's got a lot of testing. It's something that I feel is another source to address algae, but it's not anything that I would ever use ultrasound as my go-to all-around one item in the toolbox product. So ultrasound's something that we can educate you on, how to invest in it, how to use it, what benefits you can expect from it, and what you can expect from it. Get that bather load managed. If you are exceeding these 200 bathers per square foot, maybe we got to start reducing some of that. You guys being able to reapply after rain events, I think that's going to be critical if we can have you more involved and understand what's going on there. And then, get it on a better clean out schedule. If you're not cleaning your ponds out, I really think you need to start developing a plan to get that done. So moving forward, I'm all about education. I'm all about disclosure. I think you guys can do that too with your guests. Ponds really should be a lake-like environment. They really should not be swimming pools. We don't operate the same. We don't do the same type of treatments. The water's, just because it's water, it doesn't mean it's the same. I do see that confusion sometimes from your guests or maybe even from the campground owners. They think they might have a swimming pool. I strongly encourage you to consult with your local health department. Try to minimize some of the issues that other states have experienced. It's very rare on some of these ponds. Again, in Wisconsin, we've not had problems, but things like crypto. We know it can get in ponds. We know it can get in pools. We know it's in recreational water. Is there a way that we can deal with things like that better? Somewhere around your pond, you're going to have a concession stand or something. Have that as an information center. Make sure that if you know the management company or you yourself are buying your products, make sure you have the SDS sheets there. If you have that panicked mother whose child just, has an upset stomach and she's blaming it on the water, make sure you've got that information there. Maybe have pictures of what swimmer's itch is, pictures of poison ivy. So if they're coming up and they're saying they got swimmer's itch, well, let's take a look. Does it look like this? So have that ready right there, and have an action plan. If more and more people are using these ponds, the whole glamping concept, we're not just going down to the local river. They're expecting to come and swim in your pond, and they're expecting some pretty decent water quality. So when they have these issues, know how to deal with them a little bit better. And one thing on the safety concerns, that's going to be one area where the regulators are going to really look at these ponds. As more and more are going in, there's more and more features, the risks are increasing. We strongly recommend a life jacket use policy. If you've got a designated swim zone that's a shallow area and you're going to have kids that are going to go out in deep areas, we recommend mandating providing life jackets. Make sure the kids know where that drop-off point is if you have one. I know we don't have lifeguard requirements, but maybe considering increasing supervision around the ponds. Some of these bigger facilities that are putting in the large Wibbits and the obstacle courses, they're now starting to do orientations. Wristbands, they are getting actual training, they're timed. There's a designated flow. If your swim pond is just out in the back somewhere and there's no supervision at all, that might be something that you want to consider. Could you somehow incorporate some staff? I know that's expensive and labor is difficult these days, but could we supervise these a little bit better? The equipment out there that's being installed, you guys have them, you see them, they're at the trade show. But also when anything that you get that is a nice expensive piece of equipment, you got somebody that's making a knockoff. There's a lot of these products that are coming into the country that aren't really tested for safety. They aren't really tested for, some of the issues that you can have. Make sure you're putting in some good quality equipment out there because these are commercial sites and your guests are going to expect that from you. And some of the issues that we've seen is, simple anchoring problems. How do you anchor this equipment down? How do you minimize that risk with people getting tangled? Make sure you're consulting. There's these companies will have guidelines and schematics that will show you how should you properly anchor a swimming device or a flotation device, and make sure that you're following those so you don't have some of those safety concerns that help keep these in decent order. So with that, my whole idea is to be able to work with you guys, learn some of the things that we've experienced, share that with you, try and make sure these swim ponds are a great amenity. I see tons of kids and families using them. I get great compliments when we're out around the pond. But we want to make sure we keep moving in that direction. And I know this is just one small portion of all the things that goes around an entity, but hopefully that you can take something away and back to your campground to help improve your pond. So now if we got time, I'm sure with that, if there's questions.
Sometimes you need to caution yourself where you site it, where you put it, because all of a sudden you can create shoreline zoning, correct? With what you can put closer to it, what your setbacks need to be from there?
That's certainly something you need to address. Now, we do a fair amount of permitting and wetland delineations, and there's been situations where somebody has created their own water hole because of redirecting runoff. Cattails have grown up, and now they want to go and do a project, and the DNR has flagged that as a wetland. Going back through records, oftentimes you can get those reversed, that was an artificial wetland. They aren't going to consider those. So the shoreland zoning, records are going to go a long ways. Aerial photos now help a lot. We can go back many years and say this wasn't in shoreland zoning, but there are things to consider because there have been people that have been burned by that, yes.
Because if you have a body of water, there's setbacks from that, correct?
For
Citing a building or in some cases.
yeah, and
Some counties will let you have a camping trailer within 75 feet of a body of water. So if you create that body of water, you create those setbacks, I presume.
you can and you can. I'm not a specialist in all those regulations. That's where I'd encourage you to go to your local zoning and say, all right, here's our plan, here's our drawing, and if they tell you that there has to be setbacks, that's probably what you're going to follow. You'd have to take, is it going to restrict you for something in the future? If they say, yeah, you just created your own setback, well then you as, owner, you got to decide, well, is that worth it for what they're requiring me to do?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Address that up front. If you realize that might restrict in the future, well, then you'll put it in a different spot.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where if you go to, you know, these organizations up front with your plan, many of these are engineered, and the planning process is, you know, several years at times, and you get that information ahead of time. But yes, good point.
Do the muckaway tablets, do they eat up any of the muck?
Not quick enough. No.
There's what?
Muckaway pellets. So muckaway pellets, basically what they are is they're confined pacted bacteria that's put into a solid form. They sink down to the bottom of the pond. They are a product that needs a lot more testing. We have seen results. I can tell you with all the bacteria products, it's one of the least tested out there, and it's one of the highest variables in success. With the amount of muck that you could get even in 1 inch in a year on a pond, and what that can do to the fragile water quality, they're not going to reduce that muck fast enough for what we would have in a swim pond. Where we tend to use those is, I'm not going to spend $100,000 in dredging, I got nowhere to go with the material. Test the muck, you got to make sure it's got enough percent organics in it, because if it's sand, silts, and clays, they're not going to do anything. So we look at muck as anything soft. That's not always the case. It's got to have the right composition. Now we can go within a muck pellet type approach with aeration, and those bugs will start feeding on the organic portion of sediment, slowly reducing it back over time. So I would not use muck pellets as a reduction of my muck on a liner in a recreational pond like are being built, is my opinion.
If we build a pond, would you recommend putting like, how much sand would you recommend using for pond? Like how many feet of sand?
Usually about 12 to 16 inches, depending on how fluffy the sand is when you start. You're going to lose 30% right away just from compaction. There's a lot of air and fluff in it. So normally if you create the shoreline with a stone, you're going to be about 6 inches of stone, but in the beach area, we'd say about 12 to 16 inches to get that back to a, somewhere in that 10 to 12 inch finish range.
When we're sucking the muck, won't we suck up some of the sand too?
So some of the processes of how do you wash these ponds? The simplest way to do it is to use the water to your advantage. When you start dropping a pond by either an overflow device that you can pull and it'll gravity feed out, or you're going to put a pump in, the water's going to slowly start going down. And that's when I'm already starting to wash. So we use gravity, we use the water, and we'll take a pump of 2-inch centrifugal pump, okay, a dewatering pump. We'll put a shower head nozzle on like a fire nozzle, and I'll wait till I get 3-4 feet of exposed shoreline. And I'll walk around the pond and I'll wash the material. And I'll do that all the way around, and then the pond drops another 3 feet, we do it again. So what you're doing is you're letting all the material get to one central location. Okay, so we're not going to, then at the end, we're not going to suck up the sand, because all we've simply done is skim the surface of the sand, got any of the debris or stuff that's on that back to the original layer, and we're just going to wash that down. Then we're generally hitting an exposed liner. It's very easy to wash a liner. So don't dewater the pond, let everything dry, and then try and go in there and power wash it. You're going to spin your wheels. Use the water and the gravity and do it all in one process. As the water's being lowered, you'll get it all down to an area where now your centrifugal pump is sucking air, and you're left with this snot goop in the bottom. That's when you go in with that diaphragm pump, and then you suck up the bottom and you pump that out, or you have like one of these septic trucks or sediment pumping trucks come in and do the rest. That's the easiest way to wash a pond if you're going to dewater it. If you're not going to dewater it, you're going to resort to some sort of diver. If you can design your pond that is perfectly flat and smooth with a liner, there are some robotic vacuums out there that you could try and look at doing that. Might be a pretty neat technology in these ponds, but we're not there, not in the way these ponds are built. You're going to resort to a diver.
Heavy rain events, erosion, all this nice beautiful sand you truck in there, everything's on a slope, even though it's a gradual slope.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna get erosion, your beach is gonna wash into your pond, or guys haven't done what they're doing, cleaning up the muck. Are they having to do it with the cat for a few years, push the sand back up the way down?
Yeah, and then obviously we got to be careful because of equipment damaging the liner, So I've been out several times to fix a hole in a liner that someone did with trying to pull sand back up. So if you're going to do that, mark the depth of the sand. So if you're going to have a piece of equipment, some of the nicest and easiest things is just a back blade. And you can drive down, drop the blade, and take 2 or 3 inches with you at a time. Pull it up to the top and keep doing that in stages. And yes, they're pulling that sand back up. That air is re-bleaching the sand. And then if they need to add more. But certainly you're going to get a portion it's going to the bottom, and you're sucking it out, and you may have to haul in a quad or 2 of sand to replace it. There's just no way around that. But, you know, anything that's going to wash downhill, try and keep the zero entries, you know, a little bit flatter. And then we always build, when we do it, some sort of stop in the bottom substrate that the sand will sit up against. Some can still go over, but it doesn't just all slide on you then. So that's some construction features to consider. Anyone else? And we're going to be around all weekend. Oh, there's one. I'll get to you, Don.
You use it in terms, of course, lake and pond. Is there a definition?
A definition of a lake versus a pond? Yeah, that's a good question because I've had people call their 1 acre pond their lake. And by definition, it's generally defined as the amount of littoral zone that you would have. A lake has the littoral zone is the area that's capable of growing aquatic plants. A pond is a very fertile, designed to grow things, high littoral zone percentage per body of water. A lake is much different. So you can breach that. Is it a lake? Is it a pond? Based on the amount of littoral zone. But it's widely used in all different areas. So I guess it's up to you. What do you want to call yourself, a lake or a pond?
Those people I refer to going over to Europe is going across the pond.
Yes, I agree. It's used. Are we out of time? Okay. We're around here all weekend. If you got more questions, by all means, come and talk to us, and appreciate your time.